that the threat we're to be guarding against is hypocrites within the body. People who reject God, they know they reject God. They're not trying to play a part. So this threat is dangerous because it's spread so easy, but that it could be here, inside. And not only that, it's not the new people that come in infected. They're not the contagious ones. It's the ones that have been doing this for a long time, that we know the rules. New people don't know the rules. That's why they'll curse in the hallway. You're like, oh, what did they just do? Don't they know they're in church? No, they don't know that yet. They don't know the rules yet. They don't know the part they're supposed to play. But for many of us, we know the part. We know the role to play. It's the experienced people. It's the most knowledgeable people that are susceptible to hypocrisy, to be playing the part, not the new people. But Jesus' warning is stark that we need to be on guard against it because it's so contagious and it's so dangerous. And Jesus, rather than addressing this huge crowd, turns to his disciples and he gives them this warning to beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. He says it's their hypocrisy. He's describing it in this word picture as yeast. But I think it's interesting that Jesus, in his warning, in his teaching, he's pointing at the Pharisees and he's saying, don't be like them. When Jesus is teaching, and we could go back and look at the Sermon on the Mount and other scriptures, he's telling us to look at ourselves and look at your own sin nature, look at your flesh, look at what happens when you just do what you want to do and the messes that we make. But here he looks at the Pharisees and he says, don't be like them. They're hypocrites. They're hypocritical. And to beware, to be on guard against. He gives this warning, which means there must be a threat of this. That hypocrisy is something to be guarded against. And this isn't the first time that Jesus has addressed the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. In Matthew 23:3, he said, so practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example, for they don't practice what they preach. That's the definition of a hypocrite, right? It's somebody with a double standard who presents one way and lives another. The word hypocrite here used in the Greek is a word that came from the theater. It meant to act, to put a mask on, to put a mask on. That somebody would come out onto a stage with a mask on, acting. We understand what a play is, what it looks like. And that the people who are acting, that's not really who they are. It's a character that they're portraying for a short time. And this is the word that Jesus uses. He says, beware the yeast of them. They're actors. They've put on a mask. That's not really who they are. You have to guard against it. And he uses yeast, which we know yeast is used in baking. It's also used in brewing. Somebody reminded me after first service. But for this context, we're talking about bread. And it's an ingredient, a small ingredient. And what does it do? It causes dough to rise. It doesn't multiply the dough. It doesn't make more dough. When yeast is added, it's chemical reaction with the sugars. And it creates carbon dioxide, which blows, it puffs up the dough. It makes it bigger, but it doesn't add to it. It just stretches it out. It fills it with air. And this is how he describes the hypocrisy of the Pharisees as yeast. That this is something that's inside of them. It's puffing them up. It's making them present as more than they really are. And it's very dangerous. This is why he gives a warning. Why give a warning if there's no risk? Because like yeast, and just a little bit of yeast, it could be in a large batter of dough, it will start to influence the dough. It's dangerous because it spreads. It's contagious. How many of us have had a child come home from school throwing up and we think, oh man, I hope this doesn't go through the house. And we start to wipe everything down with Lysol wipes and try to keep them in their bedroom, and inevitably what happens? It goes through the house. Everybody gets it. This is what yeast does. It's there, it's not real noticeable, it just kind of blends in, but the effects of it are obvious. He said, be on guard against this. It's contagious. The yeast affects the whole thing. It spreads very easily. It's easy to become hypocritical. It happens with little notice. These Pharisees, I would argue, were not intending at the beginning of their walk with God and the zeal and the passion they had, that they would say, hey, someday, let's just be hypocrites. Let's really present to the people and let's benefit from this position that we've made, this part that we're going to play. No, I think it's something that people drift into. Until the evidence is there, they really don't know. But something happened from a good desire that taints it. It infects it. Hypocrisy is very dangerous. It's something to be avoided, to be guarding against. And here, to me, with Jesus using this word picture of yeast to the religious leaders, the Pharisees, you think about things that churches will caution their people against. It's always a threat that's outside. But yeast is internal. It's internal to the person and it's internal to the body. That the threat we're to be guarding against is hypocrites within the body. People who reject God, they know they reject God. They're not trying to play a part. So this threat is dangerous because it spreads so easy, but that it could be here, inside. And not only that, it's not the new people that come in infected. They're not the contagious ones. It's the ones that have been doing this for a long time. That we know the rules. New people don't know the rules. That's why they'll curse in the hallway. You're like, oh, what did they just do? Don't they know they're in church? No, they don't know that yet. They don't know the rules yet. They don't know the part they're supposed to play. But for many of us, we know the part. We know the role to play. It's the experienced people. It's the most knowledgeable people that are susceptible to hypocrisy, to be playing the part, not the new people. But Jesus' warning is stark that we need to be on guard against it because it's so contagious and it's so dangerous. And then he says, the time is coming when everything that's covered up will be revealed and all that is secret will be made known to all. Whatever you've said in the dark will be heard in the light, and whatever you've whispered behind closed doors will be shouted from the rooftops for all to hear. Now, they don't know, his disciples, he's talking to the disciples. They don't know what's unraveling here yet. They fully won't even understand as it's happening and right after it happens when Jesus is crucified. But we know when we were preparing for Easter and the series we went through about approaching Easter, that the disciples were locked in. They were holed up. Jesus just shows up in a room that they've securely locked themselves in because they just watched the hostility of the hypocritical religious leaders kill Jesus. And it would be normal to feel like we're at risk because we were with him. And he says, you don't have to worry about what was whispered behind closed doors. Those things will be shouted from the rooftops. You don't have to worry about what's been said in the dark, the whispers, so that other people wouldn't hear, so that you wouldn't bring persecution onto yourself. Those things are going to be brought into the light. Not only the good things, but also the secrets that these hypocrites are trying to hide, the real them that they so carefully dress up so that people never see. Everything that's covered up will be revealed. All that is secret will be made known. This is the very thing that hypocrites protect against. Hypocrisy requires concealment. The whole idea is to present in a way that makes people believe it's the real thing. That this is really how I live. The hour you spend with me on Sunday mornings is how I am every hour of every day of every week. We put this part. Now we fight against this. And I was having a conversation in between services. I said, I hope that our church is aware of this, that we value authenticity. That I don't want you to like a version of me that you only see for an hour. But if you saw me tomorrow morning, it wouldn't be the same. And I'd rather you dislike the real me than like a fake version of me. Because we can worship and not be best friends. But Jesus came down. He said, this is who I am. He was an open book. He was authentic. He was transparent. He calls us to do the same. But when we start to get concerned about what other people think, and what if these people find out about this, then we start to conceal. And now we start to put on the costume, because now it's going to be an act. Because if they find out, what are they going to think of me? I might lose some responsibility. I might not be able to lead in the children's ministry. I might not be able to do this or do that if they find. So I got to make sure that they don't find out. Hypocrisy requires concealment. It requires secrecy. Now, this isn't just, hey, there's a personal thing going on in my life or in my home. Just, hey, we keep this here, guys. We just don't. No, this is personal protection from the real truth coming out of something you're just trying to hide because you're playing a part. And hypocrites will work to contain and control the narrative. They don't want the truth to come out. They're trying to stay concealed. So when Jesus shows up at a dinner and somebody questions with a thought his behavior and he calls them out, how do they respond to this? When Jesus was leaving, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees became hostile. This is what hypocrites do. They posture. They don't say, well, you're right. Not one of them is recorded as going, you know what, we just got called out. This is embarrassing. I wish it didn't happen publicly, but what do we do to make this right? How do we fix this? No, they're trying to continue to conceal as the truth comes out. So they get hostile, trying to provoke Jesus with many questions. They wanted to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. They're not the problem. He is. So if he's going to go speak the truth and they're going to try to keep the truth concealed or they're going to try to contain it and control the narrative, then they have to discredit him. So whatever Jesus says that's truthful, they got to make people believe that he's not truthful. So the things he's saying about them isn't true. That what they see is true, but not him. They try to control it. If you've ever done something and you feel like you're being silenced by somebody who's in the body, who's a follower of Christ, know that this is what the warning is about. Trying to not be transparent or authentic. That you're not the issue. That he is. And here's how we fix that. And here's how we work. And we start to teach people how to play the game. But in the end, everything that's covered up will be revealed and all that is secret will be made known. And the things that are whispered and the things that are spoken in the dark will be proclaimed. The truth is the truth and it will all come out in the end.